Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. Great to be with you today. And I think we're going to do some traveling with our guests today.
Yeah, we're going down under.
Going down under.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to welcome Ross Heron. Ross is the CEO of the Australian Payroll Association and basically the education body there for the Australian payroll community. So, Ross, welcome. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Julie,
listen,
want to do the honors?
For a little warm up here, we always like to get to know folks, and particularly, how did you get into payroll and HR space, and why do you stay?
Well, interestingly enough, from leaving university, I went straight into payroll and HR. So I've been in it for a long time, which is usual. Normally people fall into payroll at some point in their career. Well, I kind of fell into it right at the very start of my career. You can tell by quite possibly my accent that I am from Scotland. I went through school and then on to college and to university. And on leaving university with a degree in computer programming, I joined because they had the most attractive graduate program. It was based in London and they gave me free tickets back to Scotland for a year. On the train, not an airplane, I decided to join a company called Peterborough Software. That was really my first step into what Peterborough Software were a accounting, HR and payroll provider. They had mainframe products at that particular point in time, but they were moving into desktop computing and then client server. So I joined them just at that juncture of migrating off mainframes to, desktop, PS2000, PS Enterprise. And that was really my starting point in what was the HR and payroll space. So it started from a software perspective, not a payroll practitioner's perspective.
Hey, so all of our benefits friends and total rewards leads who are like dreaming up what could possibly be a draw to bring new talent into the organization. This is maybe the first time I've heard I got free tickets back home,
Yes. Well,
for
I
a
am
year.
Scottish. So
Talk about a trip on the
anything
Titanic,
free. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. So Ross, I think you're an NGA alumni, are you not?
Absolutely. So
North
Peterborough
Gator Intel?
Software, so it went through a number of iterations. So I was there from Peterborough Software to Rebus Software to Northgate Arinzo. I think I stepped out at the point of Northgate Arinzo. Locally here, they then became Ceridian and are now Dayforce, that old entity. But yeah, I was with them all up for 10 years. Strata, yeah. So I was with them all
you're
up
right
for
though. That portion did go. That portion did go off to Ascender in Australia.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes,
that is correct.
Yeah.
Well, wait. Let me back up. Let's think about this. The body of NGA went to Alight, which became Strata. But you're right.
Yes.
The Preceda elements of A and Z got spun off and went to Ascender, which then became Ceridian and Dayforce. Yes.
Yeah.
And Dayforce.
Okay. And then the Africa
correct.
stuff. Where did the Africa payroll stuff go? Did that also go to Ascender?
I do not know.
No,
Jason
I don't
Because
Davenport
NGA
probably
chipped that
does.
off as well.
Yeah, they did. They chipped off kind of all three. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. What a small world. I had a short stint at NGA in 2010 to 2013 or 11, I think it was 12, where I helped manage Cadbury globally. So that was an exciting time. It was fun.
Yes.
Yeah. That was later in the years, but before it went off to the Alight world. So
you can see they ployed Pete with chocolate eggs. And and you got free tickets home.
I got free tickets. So why would you not get payroll and HR?
I know, right? Let me tell you a cool story about that. So when I was working with Cadbury at NGA back then, I was managing the Americas. So I would go to Mexico and Argentina a lot. That's where NGA delivered it from. And Mexico was where they had a lot of their manufacturing operations for like your I don't know what you would call it, what the word is, but like for your lozenges, like throat lozenges, gums, any of those sort of candies, but not candy, right?
Yeah.
It was more whatever. So I had all these pesos and I could go into their company store and just buy products at like, half price or whatever. So I just bought all the gum I could. You know what I mean? All the gum and cough drops I could. And I packed my suitcase and I came through the airport and I got stopped and they checked my bag and they opened it up and they were just like perplexed, like, what are you doing? And they thought at first it was pills. And I was like, no, 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 it's just chicle, right? Or it's just gum. It's just gum. So anyway, that's my NGA, yeah, alumni
That's
story.
brilliant.
Pay- Payroll. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, look, let's get into it, man. I'm dying to ask you a million questions about what's going on in the world of payroll in Australia. There's a lot going on just globally with payroll technology wise, a lot of excitement, a lot of concern for what AI is going to do. I know you got some legislation that has some people a little bit angsty. But yeah, man, what's the pulse and what's the tone? What's going on with Australian payroll right now?
Yeah, I mean, the term that's used locally here in Australia is payrolls complex, and that complexity is brought to life out of changes in legislation, of which we've had quite a few in recent years. The introduction of what we call single touch payroll, the Wage Theft Act, we've had the right to disconnect, we've got payday super coming up next year, so not too far away. So these changes in legislation, some of them are small, but some of them are quite large, which lends to, another layer of complexity. And if you peel that back a bit, more administration and more responsibility, more risk for the
Yeah.
payroll function within the organization. And that continues to grow. When you look at Australia, if you look back in time at which I smile again because I think it was an Alight driven project, the Global Payroll Complexity Index. And if you go
Yes.
back,
Yes.
to 2021, Australia was in 21st place. You fast forward 2 years, we jumped to 11th. I think PwC have now picked up the mantle of producing that report, and Australia sits in sixth position according to the analysis investigation that is done there. So you can see from those reports how Australia has increased its level of complexity when it comes to
Yeah.
administering and processing payroll in Australia. I smile because the question is, have we seen budgets and investment keep up locally with what has become a highly complex, and if you're an employer, an area of the business that carries quite a bit of risk now, and there is quite a lot of focus on it here from agencies such as the
Mhm.
Fair Work Ombudsman, which can lend to, if you get it wrong, you can get in trouble,
Yeah.
financially as an individual or as an organization. So there's a lot of focus here on payroll itself. I always,
Yeah.
again, smile because with complexity, there is always an opportunity to build smarter systems, elegant
Yep.
systems that, support and help payroll functions and professionals um, keep on top of compliance and continue to produce an accurate pay outcome and support the
Yeah.
financial well-being of the employee who's receiving that money for the hour worked. They're receiving, a fair amount of money that is accurate. So
Right.
complexity would be something, Pete and Julie, that would be called out. What's interesting is that when we've got a survey here locally that we run every year, the industry report from Australia, and yes, complexity does come out when we talk about the top risks. But number one and number two, from payroll professionals, sits in areas such as incomplete and inaccurate data and poorly integrated technology platforms, which could well point to a lack of investment from the employer, the organization, into their payroll function. So
Yeah.
complexity continues to grow, but has investment kept pace with the need to comply and remain compliant in producing an accurate pay outcome for the
Yeah.
employee?
Yeah. Anecdotally, when I talk to folks from Australia, it sounds to me like what's happening is there's a lot of employment law changes that are trickling to payroll. Is that really what you're saying as
That
well
is
there? Or are you
absolutely
seeing direct?
correct.
Yeah. And that's it's creating a lot of angst. But I think this other thing I want to talk about that I've heard multiple times is this criminality that can happen, criminal application or I guess results that can happen from payroll being wrong intentionally. is if I understand.
Correct.
Can you explain that? Because I've come across some folks over the last 2 years as this was coming on. I think it started in January, if I'm not
This
mistaken,
is
or
the wage
Q1.
theft laws, right? Is what you're
Wage
talking
Theft
about.
Act. Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wage
Yes,
Theft
yes.
Act.
Yeah.
So I've referenced that a few times because I think it's one of the it's part of a new problem we have now that may be deterring people from coming into the industry that might have where we were already having trouble, as it were. So could you explain what that is and how that really could affect a practitioner in practical sort of form? This new rule.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you peel it back to its basics, if you're in
Hmm.
payroll and with the introduction of the act, you are managing risk.
Hmm.
And it's your responsibility as an individual to ensure that risk is managed and the outcome that is produced is an accurate pay slip to the
Hmm.
employee, you know, every single time. Now,
Yeah.
when it comes to the criminal aspect of it, that is where there is an intention, a clear intention to underpay. So you know the rules, you
Okay.
know the laws, and you have made a decision as an individual or an employer to ignore that. That is
Okay.
then seen as intentional, and agencies, government departments can then come after you as a director or as an employer. Now, if you're the payroll manager and you have been involved in that, you are also
Hmm.
exposed.
Yeah.
What I would say is since that act has come into place, I don't think anyone has fallen into that bracket of being a criminal. So there hasn't been an intention. There has been a lot of organisations who have made
Hmm.
errors and have and have been called out by that. So bad press, and have had to back pay millions of dollars to their
Yeah.
workers,
Wow. Yeah.
particularly where what I call work structures are complex. So retail and hospitality, where you've got a lot of moving parts with casuals part time. And if you don't have the systems in place, and got to be careful there as well, because sometimes in payroll, we go straight to the system being the solution, the platform
Right.
being the solution. You got to have great talent who are
Yep.
well educated and well
That's what I
trained.
worry about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Um,
look, we can have people on outdated things that aren't working right and tables that aren't configured properly or maintained properly. And payroll might think it's accurate, but in reality, it's maybe not accurate. And yeah, it worries me. So yeah, go
Well,
ahead,
and
Julie.
with respect to the payroll talent shortage, I think it was ADP that put out some stats that said that Australia faces the worst payroll skills shortage in
Yeah.
all of Asia Pac. There was like only 43% of
Yeah.
companies or some incredible stat like that that dare hire their own because of the talent shortage there. Is
Yeah.
that it's that
yeah.
pronounced, is it, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing some of our larger employers and certainly some of our members at the association looking to build their own payroll talent. So if you've got the right attitude and mindset, we can teach you payroll.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a bit of a switch to, who has the right attitude, who has the right mindset, and then we'll teach you the practitioners component. So we've seen employers going there. It is very difficult in Australia to find good payroll talent. There is, clearly a lot of good payroll talent, but if you're going to market, it is very, very competitive now.
Was that always the case, or do you think that that's become more the norm recently, maybe because of these laws and just people aging out? I know we got a lot of folks that are statistically aging away from the industry.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in play there. Some of them is aging out, as you referenced, Pete. Some of it goes back to COVID and a bit
Yeah.
of a change into getting into Australia. So getting talent into Australia.
Mm.
Yeah, that's also become a bit of a challenge after, during COVID and after COVID as well. We're still feeling a little bit of a pain from that period. That was obviously a global
Yeah.
period, but yeah, that did shorten our talent pipeline slightly.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. How is kind of you were talking about sort of the innovation, right? Like maybe folks aren't adopting as fast as compliance is evolving. I would argue you could probably apply that to most countries
Yeah,
when it comes to payroll, sadly. Um, and it bums me out because there's so much more innovation available now than there was just 10 years ago, or God forbid, even 20 years ago. Um, so there's kind of no excuse, right, to be operating these really outdated ways, but yet companies haven't come around to really making it a priority unless there's something going wrong, right? And that
yeah,
that bums me out because you're right. It's
yeah,
not we're not we already aren't keeping up, I would argue, in HR. Payroll definitely was never never the leader when it came to getting tech first. But now it's almost like it's getting to a point where you're right. Like, is there a breaking point where people are just going to have to do something?
Look, you're absolutely right. Again, where there are issues, then you find someone wanting to put out in a fire, and that
Yeah,
fire, you then see investment to put out that particular fire. Whether or not that uh, investment continues and there's a proactive approach to payroll management and compliance, that is a question. Um,
yeah,
what certainly I see here, and we have a number of employers, and I'm not just talking ones and twos, but we have employers where the payroll leader um, has a very strong voice within the organization and is championing payroll within there. They're championing their team. They're championing
awesome.
for investment in their people. They've got the attention of the executive and the leaders, which is leading the organization to start to understand what are the pains that we're facing today in payroll and what are potential gains we could get if we look at transforming our kind of, when we talk about payroll, we've got to also remember that payroll is the end point, and there's a lot of pay
Yes,
rolling that happens upstream, and
right.
payroll it kind of happens. Recruitment, that's all payroll, right? It all comes through to producing that accurate outcome. So those organisations that take an all of business approach or view of payroll are the ones, and where you've got a leader in there that's strong and is vocal about the importance of a payroll and is seen as a strategic advisor to potentially the leadership team or the board, that's where we're seeing investment. So I think, what I am always an advocate for when speaking to payroll professionals is you've got a voice, raise your voice, let the executive understand the pains you're facing today, but be really clear on the gains that you can deliver to the organization if you have the right
Yeah.
level of investment.
Do you think that Australian payroll leaders are getting that opportunity? Are they making advancements towards the table, right? A seat at the table in that way?
Look, because of the changes in legislation and this focus on compliance, boards are asking the question, what is the state of our compliance with payroll today? What
Mhm.
is the current state? And and they want a response to that. So then there's focus on the payroll function and the leader of payroll. Now, obviously within employers today, payroll and its reporting line is generally split between HR and finance, probably
Yeah.
more towards HR than finance, but there is
Mm.
a split there. So the chief people officer or the CFO is then going into the business and asking the payroll leader, look, we need to get, transparency into compliance. How are we going to do that? What does that
Yeah.
look like? So that is bringing focus into payroll here in Australia. And with that focus, there is absolutely an opportunity for the payroll function and payroll leaders
Yeah.
to, start to service the business differently and provide strategic advice based on the data that sits within the HR and payroll environment.
I'm curious to know when it comes to keeping pace in the investment space, if the the large technology solutions for Australian payroll, the SAPs, the ECP version, Workday, Dayforce, they all came out before a lot of this legislation began to get interspersed into the payroll. And so, are you seeing even the big payroll engines keeping pace with investment?
Yes, so those providers that you mentioned, Julie, they've all made a decision to enter into the Australian market. What happens with legislative changes here is the government will set a date of when that legislation starts. Providers of software will then say, can we get an extension on that, please, be it 12 months or 2 years? So we see that playing out. I mean, clearly, when there's changes to legislation, it does have an impact directly on innovation. So we have a change coming up next year, Payday Super. If you look at developers and they operate, I think, using terms like it's going to be in this sprint, they probably lose a large number of sprints in a calendar year to keeping up with legislation And that stops them from delivering innovation to the
Yeah.
front end because they obviously need to continue to comply, which has to be done. But it does in some way stifle innovation. But
Yeah.
providers like Workday and SAP, they just need to keep pace. So if they enter this market, they need to understand the development resources and time that needs to be invested to operate
Yeah.
in this market, which is a small market, right? We are not a large country. We're certainly not as large as the US. And if you look at France and the UK, we are a much smaller market and much smaller population, but all the large payroll providers have a presence here in the
Yeah.
ANZ region.
Yeah.
For that compliance reason.
Getting promoted to sixth in complexity isn't really great if you're just behind Brazil and France.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. If it
And-
if it was a
Ouch.
wrong
pop
way,
chart,
wrong
we'd like
direction.
to be up the top, but it's not a pop
Yeah.
chart.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Ross, do you see any of that shift in where payroll's reporting finance versus HR changing at all in the Australian market? I mean, I like when you said that payroll is risk management because I think at its very lowest denominator, whatever you want to say, it net it out. That's what we're talking about. That's what payroll leaders are, risk managers.
Yeah.
Does payroll need to report to risk or the chief risk officer or legal or something like that? I mean, how are you guys looking at that in terms of, and I'm surprising it doesn't lean finance because finance is more controllership oriented, tends to be a little bit more risk adverse than maybe HR. HR will shoot from the hip sometimes um,
Yeah.
when it comes to payroll. But yeah, what do you see in that way in terms of reporting structures?
Look, in Australia, when we look at the data, there is a slight kind of push towards HR. So let's just
Mhm.
say it's a 60-40 split, right, between HR being 60 and a finance being 40. What we
Mhm.
have seen here with the changes in our laws is we've seen a new role appear within
Mm.
larger employers, and that role being payroll compliance officer, payroll compliance manager.
Okay.
Now, what we've seen with that role is that role doesn't report to HR and that role doesn't report to finance. It reports and it sits in the risk area of the organization. And
Mm.
that role will come out and it will do compliance checks on the payroll at the
Yeah.
end of the month to make sure have we made any mistakes? Are there underpayments? Are there overpayments that we need to look at and alter ahead of the next the next pay run? Some of our larger employers clearly has multiple entities, so the payroll compliance officer or manager may cycle through each of those entities, helping ensuring that they've got internal compliance while also leveraging at some point in the calendar year an independent third party to come in and review payroll or complete a payroll compliance audit within that particular employer. So that's an
Yeah.
interesting move, right? Where we're seeing a role that's being created and it's reporting to a different function.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. It's almost like payroll's starting to dip its toe into the ESG kind of world a little bit.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. Because when you look at
yeah.
here in Australia, if you go to kind of Western Australia, here we've got a large amount of resources that sit in our grounds, minerals,
Mhm.
and we're very lucky for that.
Yeah.
Um, but health and safety is such,
Yeah.
so critical within those mining organizations, Rio Tinto,
Yeah.
BHP, and so on and so forth. You know, I think what we're now seeing the opportunity is for payroll and that risk that sits around payroll to be held in the same regard as the health and safety of the employee at work. Is it not just as critical that they're
Yeah.
paid well, because that's their financial well-being that we're playing with there? So you've got the health and safety, but you've also got the financial well-being. And the pay slip, the pay accuracy is the number one benefit that the employee receives, right? So you don't want to get that wrong, or you don't want to be making errors on a regular basis, because then the employee becomes disengaged and potentially,
Sure.
separates from the
Yeah.
organization.
On and on, right? It
Yeah.
threatens the brand, all that. Can I ask you a
Correct.
question that may come back to where we started? With all of these sort of ripple effect of employment law changes that are coming around, are they creating a more employee friendly environment, or is it maybe swinging the other way to employers? Like, what is sort of the tone of some of the compliance that's changing? Because I keep hearing the employment law is changing.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are so if you some of them are in favor of the employee, and it becomes
Hmm.
more difficult for you as an employer from an
Yeah,
administrative. So it becomes more costly to run a business because of the
sure.
changes in law. But the focus is around, protecting the employee. So if when you have a look at the introduction of payday super, which is ensuring that superannuation pension is paid on the same day that you get your pay slip, right? Whereas here in Australia, you could pay it
Hmm.
once a quarter. Many employers paid it once a month. The reason for
Okay.
bringing that in is that we've got a $5 billion black hole where employers have not been paying superannuation. So the
Mm.
introduction of that particular law is to protect the employees to ensure they are getting paid their superannuation. So when they retire, they can do so um, with happiness, right? They've got
Yeah,
some
yeah,
cash that they can, then spend time at home with their grandchildren and so on and so forth. So it is more focused on protecting the employee
yeah,
and ensuring the employer is doing the right thing.
yeah, yeah. And for those that aren't from Australia, superannuation is similar to, I guess, what would be maybe our Social Security in America. It's like retirement pension type.
Yeah.
Retirement pension,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say thank you for going back to payday super and superannuation because it would be criminal to have an Australia payroll conversation and not
I know.
not say something about superannuation, and I feel like we need to say fortnight too. So
Fortnight, yeah,
it
weekly, fortnightly, monthly, and we've also got long service leave.
I wonder if there's a chance that maybe some of those things might ultimately press on moving more towards some monthly payrolls like the rest of the world. I mean, we're as multi-frequency as Australia is, but I had heard that earned wage access is actually gaining momentum in Australia where in other countries it's really not. And so in some places, I think the idea is, well, if I can pay out more frequently, maybe my pay periods can actually be more prolonged, and that would make administration easier.
Absolutely. I think, we're ultimately,
I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a lot of movement.
there's a lot of movement. I mean, someone's got to administer that. There's this argument here now
yeah,
locally that, year end used to be an arduous task for payroll and finance to get through. Whereas with the introduction of, some of the new laws we've seen here, every single pay period is like a mini year end. And year ends
Mhm.
actually become quite straightforward. But every single time you go to close off that pay period, there's a layer of administration that needs to be undertaken to complete that pay period. So a bit like a mini year end.
yeah. Going back to that EWA point, Julie. I mean, I'm not entirely clear on the construct. Like, I know, for example, earned wage access wouldn't really work well in Belgium, right? It just doesn't fit their construct. So I don't know how similar the US and UK might be to Australia from that adoption perspective, but just from the perspective of a digital method of pay, I found, at least in my research and work, that Asia Pac period is very much forward on that as a norm. So employees are almost more expecting digital payments, to where I think EWA, regardless of their financial wellness situation, could actually be very appealing. Is that a good assumption, Ross, or am I wrong about that? Are you guys pretty forward with digital as I think?
No, so I think when you come into Australia, the answer is no. When you look at APAC and you
Asia
look at
Pac, yeah,
Asia Pac, you look at Singapore, you look at Japan, you look at
yeah,
China, digitally, they are far more advanced
yeah,
as
very forward,
individuals than we are.
yeah,
So everything's on the mobile phone. Everything's on the mobile phone. So obviously, you would expect to be able to draw down your wages, make payments. Locally here in Australia, yes, we are seeing traction with earned wage access, but in particular industries,
yeah,
healthcare, retail,
frontline, yeah,
hospitality, frontline workers. That is really where that
yeah,
is a hotbed. In your monthly professional services type organizations, the monthly pay, that
yeah,
monthly pay, we're not seeing, even though there are benefits, because sometimes we do get caught short and our fridge does break or if something does break at home. My wife's car broke down yesterday,
yeah,
and I might need to access money straight away. It would be a nice
yeah.
tool to be able to safely access and responsibly access and to make a payment that I didn't foresee coming.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, no, I think it's really the modern direct deposit. I've said that before. I think that's just kind of where things are headed. If you look at the way stable coins are going, if you look at the way we're moving money now in real time, I just think it's the future as is. And yeah, so that's a good point. I think that Asia Pac has been very fast at adopting those things. So it's interesting to hear that Australia is a little bit slower. How about just from the perspective of what you've seen in the market, right? I've seen all of the vendors really going hard on Australia. A lot of it because of the complexity, the lack of obviously, adoption of innovation. There's a lot of opportunity, greenfield, green space there. But what are you seeing? Do you think? How do you feel about kind of the market right now? Do you feel like there's too many solutions, not enough solutions, the wrong solutions? Like, what's this? What's your sort of point of view from that perspective?
Look, we've got a lot of service providers and solution providers
Yeah.
here in Australia. We've got a myriad of local who really only do Australia, and then we've also got a large number of global providers who have entered into this market.
Hmm.
So it's difficult from a procurement perspective when you
Yeah.
go to market. What is the right solution for me? Because as sometimes when you enter a conversation with a partner and a sales representative, the solution can do everything,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah,
you can
always.
get caught you always, and you can kind of get caught up on features and bells and whistles
Yeah.
without actually doing the due diligence. And I'm a big fan of proof of concepts, right? Of actually saying, okay, let's get a clear understanding about what this platform or solution is going to look like
Yeah.
day to day for our HR and payroll people to interact with. Is it going to automate? Is it going to save time? What benefit and efficiency is it going to bring to the organization? What's the employee experience, most importantly, going to look like
Yeah.
if we move forward with this tool? So I think it is very, very difficult now for organizations to, identify a solution. It's something that we help our members with. It is, and some of them have jumped on the coattails of AI enabled. Now, again, I smile because sometimes that's just business intelligence and it's been around for a
Yeah.
very long, long time, right? Where we are now starting to see some providers, there's one particular global provider that, I've had a look at. And yes, there is AI, there is kind of foresight enabled reporting. It is prompting up potential errors in the next pay run. Those are the types of things that, payroll professionals are looking for. How
Yeah.
can AI, allow me to be more compliant, more accurate, produce a stronger outcome for the employee. So the space at the moment, I think there is genuinely an opportunity for someone or a couple to become front runners, because I do
Yeah.
think when you go have a look across the playing field, there's a lot of same with a
Yeah.
spike here. They're slightly better in this space, they're slightly better in that space, but there is always an opportunity for someone to become a real
Yeah.
kind of front runner locally and also globally.
Is the cultural attitude towards managed services outsourcing positive or negative? I mean, I've always seen it be pretty healthy market, but is that changing with the complexity and the loss of talent and all of that? Is managed services going up?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so a lot of
I think it is everywhere.
organizations, it is. It's one of the
Yeah.
first things, that and it's
Yeah.
certainly an executive or a director will ask, can we outsource this
Yeah.
risk? The challenge is yeah, you can outsource it, but you as the employer are still liable. So you're still responsible for
Sure.
complexity. So when you get
Yep.
into the conversations with the payroll outsourcing providers, that really becomes a little bit of a sticking point about, okay, but I still need to retain some form of payroll compliance within my organization, within my four
Yeah.
walls. And then you will, obviously act on information that we pass through to you to then produce that payroll output.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk AI for just a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
What's the tone? What's the attitude? How are employers looking at it? Practitioners? How are you guys looking at helping practitioners with that? Like, what's just sort of the tone right now? I feel like
yeah,
everybody's really kind of excited for it, but also a little bit cautious, optimistic, right? Playing it safe and taking their time. But what are you seeing in Australia?
Yeah, so we did a survey recently in partnership with a provider, the Access Group, and the output from that indicated that 49% of the payroll professionals that participated in the survey had zero adoption of AI
Yeah.
within their payroll function.
Okay.
So,
So about
like
half.
you, about half. Now, there is, I guess there is, as you say, excitement, but that excitement hasn't come through to adoption quite yet.
Yeah.
There were a very small percentage who I would love to meet and understand what they've done, like 2%, who said they were
Yeah.
fully embedded with AI within their payroll function. I'd love to have a
Yes.
look at what that looks like. But at the moment, it is in that area of caution, excitement with caution, that we're seeing locally here in Australia.
Yeah.
And then when we ask that, what is it that they want AI to support them with, it is in that area of, compliance,
Yeah.
data accuracy, foresight, reporting. Those are the key areas that they would want the tool, obviously, and also automation of routine tasks
Yeah.
clearly is something else that they're keen on.
Yeah, it's early, right? I think it's early. Are the laws in Australia starting to come around AI as well? There's that we have the EU AI Act. Does Australia have something similar already?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
We've had a number of cases here where, law firms, the big four, have been caught out by using AI to support the outputs in cases or produce the outputs of particular reports, which has caused issues with
Yeah.
and obviously reputational damage. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some kind of introduction. We've just this, I think it's next week here in Australia, social media platforms for those under 16, not in the AI space, but they can't use platforms like that any longer. And certainly not the full version of the platform. So we've got a very strong focus on kids and social media here at the
Yeah.
moment and the
Yay,
exploitation we
bravo.
see in
We
there.
need that here.
Yeah.
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 So well, my kids certainly wouldn't agree with you, Pete or Julie, that
Yeah,
they
I
think
know.
that
I
it's
know.
not, it's
Yeah.
a terrible idea.
Yeah.
They'll
That they
grow up
can't.
and agree
Yeah.
eventually.
I
What
was
do you
one of
mean they
those
can't
parents that
use
had
YouTube?
I was one of those parents that had to deal with it for the first time. I would say probably, we were the young parents dealing with social media and phones, so I sympathize. I'm glad you guys have that. But I can see this intersection between some AI law and guardrails and the practitioner thing, right? About saying, hey, you can't make errors. Well, hell, if I think I'm doing it right and the AI does something wrong, right? I mean, I'm not that you can go, oh, it wasn't my fault. You still have to know what the AI is doing and be able to, test that. But I
Yeah,
think that I'm kind of wondering, just seeing the way the EU has enacted legislation around AI and using it nefariously. I can see where that's going to come into play at some point for everyone. And with you guys
correct.
having these laws that are really, really looking over the employee totality of pay, I guess you could say, like you said, the employers that are skipping out on superannuation and other things. I can see these things kind of coming together at some point, I think.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing, just going to that point, is within the association, we have invested
Yeah.
significantly in an AI assistant
Yes, I
for our
saw that. You
membership
sent that to
base.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, so and we recently won an award for the innovation. We call the AI assistant Beryl, so she
Yeah.
has a name. Essentially, that AI assistant, you can ask it any question in relation to payroll legislation, termination pays, leave, anything to do with payroll from a practitioner's perspective. And the tool will give you a response in around about a minute. So, it is to complement our help desk where we have humans answering phones and obviously replying to tickets.
Yeah.
So Beryl is available. We built Beryl predominantly for small business in Australia so that a business owner, particularly, if they've got 10 employees, 50 employees, they could, purchase a license for Beryl.
Nice.
It's on a month-to-month basis, so it's a subscription service. They can, interact with the tool, get the response, and then take action. The
That's great. Yeah.
challenge, it is awesome. We launched it about 3 months ago. We've got
So
several
that's not
hundred
just for
users
your
already.
members then. That's for anyone to generally
Anyone,
use to help with
anyone,
their
yeah, yeah,
compliance. Yeah,
can help
wonderful.
with compliance. Yeah. What
Yeah.
What's interesting though is that you then you've got to trust the source. So we're the Australian Payroll Association.
Mhm.
We support around about 10,000 payroll professionals here in Australia. So we are viewed as a trusted source for payroll information and a supporter of compliance. But
Yeah.
with tools like that, the individual still needs to be able to verify that output. And that is something that is then lending to us to look at what training courses we need to put in place
Hmm.
to help organizations or individuals be able to verify. So when
That's
you
great.
build
So you're getting data on the back end.
correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So when you build an AI tool, one, it's got to be a trusted source, but you also need to have the human who's being able to verify that and then take action. And obviously, we obviously get to see all the levels of questions that come in, and from
Yeah.
that, we can build out training events to then support our members or customers of that particular service offering.
Yeah, I love that. I love that productizing that knowledge that you guys have. I mean, you have years of it, and so what are some of the other ways you're looking at helping? Because I think there's just this. There's a lot of changing skills in the future of payroll's role, right? I think it's going to be very change agent, Big Four consulting, um, data analytics, data science. Not so much the ticking and tying past, right? And I think that that's a different skill. Not everybody's going to necessarily want to lean into those skills. I think there's going to be a
Yeah.
lot more leadership skills needed, business leadership skills. What are you guys doing in that way to kind of get your folks ready for that? What are some of the future of payroll trainings that you guys are thinking about?
Yeah, so we've got an approach which one looks at data analytics
Hmm.
and being able to, as an individual, consume that and then take action upon, that output from the system.
Yeah,
But also, when you have a look at payroll being an all of business solution, how as a leader you can step into the business and become a strategic advisor to the organization with a particular focus on payroll and risk. So those are the two key areas that we are focusing on. We also are aware that those I guess if you look back historically, you would potentially come into payroll as a payroll officer. That would be your
hmm,
test kind of learning ground. That will shift slightly. So, how we support people getting into payroll and the skill set that they
wonderful.
require, because they
Yeah,
will have the support of an AI assistant in multiple forms, not just from payroll, but they'll have one to help with administration of the role. They'll have one to help with the technical nature of the role. So allowing in that technical nature for them to have the knowledge to be able to verify that output, that's something that we're also looking at as well. How that's delivered, as we look at the shifting demographic in the workplace. Historically it was, a workshop in a hotel for 1 day, 2 day. Then we've obviously through COVID, everything's kind of become virtual in environments like this. Then through to how my kids learn, which is all in bite-sized 45-minute, 30-minute
yeah,
chunks. So we've
micro
got to
learning.
also look at that delivery of learning to make sure that we're meeting the payroll professional, with with in a delivery mode that
Yeah.
appeals to them and they accept.
How do we get more people to start out in payroll like us, young? Yeah. How do we do it, man? What's the
We
answer?
need
Because
we need
we're losing people.
TikTok payroll channel or
I
something.
know. Would you call it an extreme sport?
Extreme.
Last time, Julie, I think you called it extreme sport. I think it's true. Maybe we could recruit that way. We're pitching it wrong. But
Hey,
yeah, we've got to do more.
I have a random geography question. Again, I feel like I can't leave this conversation without asking you. So
Yeah.
many people kind of lump A and Z together. And with the changing
Guilty.
complexities in Australia, I'm just curious, like, how close of a bedfellow is New Zealand to, payroll in New Zealand to payroll in Australia? Is it keeping pace with your
Yeah.
complexity
I
with your
wonder if it's
complexities
similar to
or
US and
merging?
Canada.
It's same but different. So if
Yeah.
you speak to a Kiwi, they will talk to you. A New Zealand payroll professional, they will talk to you about their Holiday Act and the complexities of that. So they've got different layers of complexity in different areas, but the two countries are very different, which is really hard when you're an employer of in this region and you've got 800 employees in Australia and 300 in New Zealand, and the legislation is completely different.
Yeah,
With that said, very much like the
yeah.
United States, we've got different states: New South Wales, Victoria, Western Australia. We then have in each state different regulations,
State
particularly
law,
around
yeah, yeah.
leave, which have to be aligned with as well. So then you can see why payroll becomes an administrative nightmare for an employer, because we've
Yeah.
got two countries completely different legislations. Then in Australia, we've got, our states, completely different legislations. So
Yeah. Is
complex.
there reciprocity where they kind of cooperate at all?
Mm, Not really. No.
Not
No,
really. Yeah.
no.
Yeah, we didn't cooperate with Canada either, so it's all right. We get it. I don't think the UK and Ireland cooperate either. So
No.
no, I understand. But hey, let me ask you this, Ross, just to get you out of, I mean, I love talking to you and I really appreciate it. We almost need a state of Australian payroll every year. Maybe you can come back next year again. But
Absolutely.
tell me what your thoughts are. I asked Jason Davenport this a couple of times. What are your thoughts on, you just look at the way, like I know a number of organizations in Australia are multi-country, right? Have footprints around Asia Pac, some, even in Europe and America. There's a growing number of younger, more emerging multinationals, right? Multi-country. The payroll role is becoming more global, right? For a lot of enterprises and even smaller companies. Is it time for us to have a global consortium of education for payroll, like a governing body similar to, the APA or the payroll org or any of these groups in their countries to maybe be bringing you all together under one sort of common banner? I don't know.
Mission.
Or just mission. Yeah, at least, right? To get you aligned. Do we need it? Is it in the works?
Potentially from a global payroll council perspective, I think when you have a look in each of the countries, and if I have a look at an employer like Atlassian, for example,
Mhm.
who are an Australian startup with a global footprint now, their head of payroll has a global view, so she needs to be across, processing, managing the risk in each of the countries that she has responsibility for. I think, in roles for individuals like that, being part of a global payroll council who talk about the challenges and potentially
Yeah.
raise those challenges up. I think when you step down into legislation and training, it becomes so finite and technical
Oh, very.
that it becomes
Yeah.
very, very difficult. I mean, yeah, I think something more around, a global payroll council who are particularly looking at allowing, it's obviously great if we have an employer who is a startup in a country and then grows and employs more people as they grow. They go from five. So that's great for the global economy and being able to support that growth without getting that employer tied up in red tape,
Yeah.
clearly has a benefit for the global economy. I think, sometimes, red tape makes it challenging for countries, for large employers. And then we see the birth of, I guess, tools like the employer of record, right? That's why they exist, to help those organizations accelerate growth into different geographies.
I feel like
Exactly.
maybe if we try to take a global payroll council that did things to ban instead of, having to align and promote similar stuff. Like this is a really crappy thing to do,
Don't do this. Yeah.
in your country, and it results in chaos and total madness. So don't do that. That would
Yeah.
maybe be more
Yeah.
popular.
Here's what not to do. A book of what not to do. Well, look, Ross, this has been outstanding. Where can folks connect with you? And if you'll share the AI assistant link and the research link, I'll make sure we share that as well. But where can folks get in touch with
Absolutely.
you and the APA, the Australian Payroll Association?
Yeah, I mean, you can quite happily drop me an email and I will always respond myself. Yeah, if you want to stick that up on the link, Pete, that would be great. Or just jump on
Okay.
our website. As I say, we support just over 10,000 payroll professionals here in Australia. And if you are, sitting in the US and you've got an operation here in Australia and you want to have a conversation about risk and compliance, I'm always happy to have a chat.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. And thank you for what you do for payroll. We appreciate it. I'm excited to come and present the Payroll Profession
Yeah,
Confidence Index to your members tomorrow. I know you guys participated the last 2 years. I appreciate that. I hope you'll continue to do that. And yeah, I'm excited to come and exchange with them and show that. And you guys keep doing what you're doing, and we're always here for you. So let us know how we can help. Well, look, thank you so much, Ross. And thank you to everyone. Julie, good to see you.
Likewise.
And we
thank
will be
you.
back
Thank you, Julie.
very, very soon.